collection.
Let's go.
All your friends are.
Yeah, it's a lovely, lovely audience.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stand right in between you two.
Okay,
We're good. I'm just gonna kind of project and do stuff. First of all, hi. I was just telling these two, like, their friends are so prompt, so thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us here at Green Apple Books on the Park. I'm Cara. I'm the events coordinator here for Green Apple. And we are here celebrating Isaac Fellman's Dead collections. Let's give it up for Isaac. So I have a couple of announcements before we get started, and I'm going to keep my mask on for our announcements, and then I'm going to ask that you folks keep your masks on for the duration of the event, and we will give our authors the grace to take them off if they so choose, but they are also welcome to keep them on. They're gonna keep it on. So we're just going to project from the diaphragm, but on to the business. I wanted to let you folks know about a couple of events that we have coming up. First, on this coming Monday, February 28th at 7 p.m., both in person and online, we'll be hosting Grace Lavery as she discusses her book, Please Miss, A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Penis, alongside Hannah Zeven. Of the book, Carmen Maria Machado says, quote, "This is the queer memoir we've been waiting for, a dizzying mix of theory, pastiche, metafiction, memory. Lavery is an avalanche you'll be glad to be buried under." This event is free, but registration is required. That's going to be on Monday, February 28th at 7 p.m. We do have a full calendar of our events on our website at greenapplebooks.com. And I'm not above it. If you've been here before, please do buy books. Please do buy books from us, an independent bookstore, as opposed to, thank you. Oh, thank you. As opposed to, another website that we can think of. So any indie, I don't even care if it's ours, just any independent bookstore, but you are here, so consider it. And I can think of at least 2 books that you can purchase this evening. So think about that on your way out. Okay, what else do I usually bore the audience with? Oh, I want to let you know that we have a Q&A after the discussion this evening. So if you have any questions, do keep them in your brain space, and we'll get to them at the end of the hour. And thank you again for keeping your masks on and being cool as we all try and stay safer during this strange time. So thanks very much for being here. And thank you to all of you online for joining us as well. Yay, online. I wanted to just give you a little background on our 2 authors that are joining us, and then I'll get out of your hair here. First, we have Charlie Jane Anders, the author of Victory is Greater Than Death, now out in paperback, as well as the story collection, Even Greater Mistakes. She's also the author of Never Say You Can't Survive, The City in the Middle of the Night, and All the Birds in the Sky. With Annalee Newitz, she co-hosts the podcast Our Opinions Are Correct. She is a perennial Green Apple favorite. Please welcome Charlie Jane Anders. And last but most certainly not least, Isaac Fellman is the author of...
I got frustrated.
Oh no, that was perfectly appropriate. Let's do it one more time. The author of The Breath of the Sun, which won the 2019 Lambda Literary Award for LGBT fiction, fantasy, and horror. He is an archivist at a queer historical society here in San Francisco. His book, Dead Collections, is the reason we are here tonight. So please do join me in welcoming Isaac Fellman.
Wow, I was telling Charlie Jane just now that my first reading that I did for The Breath of the Sun, literally nobody showed up except my folks and the manager of the bookstore. So I'm really thrilled and honored to have you all here and the internet people as well. Shall I read from my book for a few minutes and then we'll chat?
Yeah, please.
It's
It's so awesome, you guys. It's so awesome.
Whoa, that was like very sudden. I was told that I can pretend I'm at karaoke and then just like fully commit to like licking the microphone. as much as I physically can under this thing. Here I go. I'm just going to read from the beginning of the book. It's got, set pieces and, grand love affairs. It's a kissing book, but, I just thought I would begin at the beginning. It felt right. Chapter 1, a slow event. When I was training to become an archivist, wow, my glasses steamed up immediately. That's what happens.
It's a steamy book.
It's steamy.
Steamy.
All right, I'm going to read with the naked eye. Even hotter. When I was training to become an archivist, my mentor told me, a thing is just a slow event. The line wasn't hers, but it struck me with the needle prick of originality. A slow event. A person is like that too. An event 70 or 80 years long, very complex, hundreds of systems, iron and nitrogen and oxygen, blood flowing into blood. The story is a mystery of sorts, although most mysteries begin with a dead body. That's a thing whose event is nearly done, with its last climaxes soon to come. The dead body is always pretty rude. It comes into your life, reminds you of the joke at the end, ruins your appetite, ruins your day. There are no dead bodies in archives, except maybe for mine. Oh, sometimes there are ashes and a few times bones, and there's often quite a lot of hair. But in general, what you find in archives is the absence of a body, the chalk outline of a life, crowded all around with papers and artifacts and ephemera, but with a terribly small hollowness within. You can almost taste the closeness of the body sometimes, almost feel the glossy heat of it, but never quite. It's cold in the archives, and there's nobody there. I belong in the archives. I am cold too. As that day began, I was soaking my hands in hot water till they got warm enough for me to shake somebody else's. I champed one and then the other into my styrofoam cup, and with the hand that wasn't soaking, I kept trying and failing to get my phone to acknowledge my fingerprint. When it's warm enough for the button to work, that's how I know it's warm enough for a handshake. Plus, I wanted to read my phone. I didn't see myself as being in the closet about my illness, my vampirism, but I'd only ever told my boss and HR. As for telling visitors, it felt too private to explain, especially early in the morning in a room where the guests aren't even allowed coffee. So I give them a mock-up of life, immersing my hands in the water till it took on its warmth like rubber does, and putting on gloves when I handled photographs in front of visitors, although my fingers make no prints. My coworkers also didn't know that I lived down here, and for that matter, neither did HR. There was a couch in my office where I would sometimes lie down for what passes for my sleep. There was a vivid network of bars, all-night coffee shops, and wet, sugary streets in which I could take my greedy sips of fresh air at night. I do drink, you see, and I do breathe. And I can eat if I want, but only the strongest foods make any impression on my burned out taste buds, and of course, none of them nourish me. They tend to be preserved foods, strong kimchi, pungent cheese, ultra-sweet jams and jellies. I'm all about preservation. I never meant to become such a walking stereotype, but I love my work. Someday I will write all of this down. For now, I prefer it in my head where it's mutable and fresh as clay. I prefer to remember this story between one bright moment and the next of an increasingly crowded life. It's not an old story yet, and I am still figuring out what it means. I used to be an archivist at the Historical Society of Northern California. The society is in the basement of the building on Market Street, a basement whose generous toilet was always on the edge of overflowing and which had mice, but not rats. My coworkers recognize that this is just based physically on the place where I work. It's the mice. The rooms were really designed to be storerooms. I had an office by virtue of my seniority, which was just off the main workroom and 50 feet from the vault. The director's office was next door. She was off on maternity leave, so I was in charge. The carpet was thinly striped in maroon and beige, clotted with dust and crud, rusty staples. The walls between the offices and the vault don't have any tops to them. You could bung a penny or a plastic clip right over them, and I have, late at night after everyone's gone home. Every day, I felt the city's palpable weight. There was a 10-story building above us, sealing the daylight out like a stamp, but it felt sometimes like 50 stories, 100 stories. I would come out at night, almost dazed that the city was so small. In my mind, it all grew to monstrous height above me, rootless and dazzling. The elevator dinged outside the archives door. Normally at that point, you heard an anxious, oh, the sound of somebody turning our gritty steel doorknob, unsure whether the archives can even be in here, in this vinegar-smelling hallway, like a conduit for acid, like a long-abandoned part of the body. Elsie turned it with confidence, like staff. But when she was inside, her hands were hesitant, and she looked around the same way most people do at first, slow and wondering, with more up in the look than usual. Our ceiling's low, but people always do look up, as if they're worried about the weight of the city too. It's hard to remember my first impressions of Elsie, who's become so familiar to me that these memories are all worn away like stones in a watery cave. First impressions are strange things. I believe in them the way I believe in fortune telling. What then did she pretend? I think she was all stiffness and solidity. A tall woman, big, in a stiff green velvet dress whose skirt stood out from her hips. Some big women are loose and soft with the creamy invitingness. I mean, not of attitude of personality, but a coincidence of how their bodies built. Elsie's body was of denser stuff, and her face was matte and inexpressive, and her brown hair in a curly bob was very much done. I read her as about my age, 41, although I look much younger than I am, and it turned out she looked a little older. Her fingernails were matte too, kept short but manicured in black, and when her hand met mine, it was as if it had slipped beneath my painstakingly warm skin and peeled it off. She was shaking raw muscle, and her hand was much colder than mine. Her shape was weak, her hand soft. Where had this jolt come from? This shot to the heart? I saw my little office through her polite eyes, the jar of bitten pencils, the trash can full of water-damaged folders. On the wall was a panel from an old exhibit, Blood, the Last 100 Years, a paragraph of absurdly somber text headlined Vampirism, the Thirsty Sickness.
God, I love it so much. Such a great book. You all are for a total treat. So, okay, let's talk about vampirism.
Yeah.
So, I feel like we're kind of used to certain images of vampires. Like if you have obsessively watched the Vampire Diaries, like I have, you kind of have this idea of what vampires are about and that they're kind of sexy and dangerous and like, I don't know, whatever. And there's like a line, this is a bit of a spoiler, I apologize. There's a line halfway through the book where you say that the average life expectancy of somebody who's become a vampire is 3 years. And, can you tell us more about that? What made you decide to kind of make your vampires kind of weirdly fragile and very vulnerable instead of these kind of like powerful, like unstoppable forces that they normally are?
Yeah, it's, I just don't, I don't tend to get excited about an idea until I can figure out how to make it suck for my character. It's so many things in life are, medically and bureaucratically difficult and just sort of challenging to get through. And you're just, Saul is always, there's not a scene where he like talks to an unfriendly doctor, but maybe that would have just been too on the nose for trans people. He certainly has to go to like sort of like a grim blood transfusion clinic every week. And, and he also is in constant danger. And I liked the idea of emphasizing constant danger in this experience of being a vampire, just because, the sun, man, it kind of gets everywhere. It's pretty ubiquitous. A lot of the book is about his challenges trying to deal with, like at work with HR, and they don't want to accommodate the fact that you can't go outside. It just interested me so much more to write about, a guy who was in constant danger and trouble and who could have an easier life, except that people don't want to help him as much as they could. So.
Yeah, and that actually leads very smoothly into my next question, which is like, all the stuff in the book about like dealing with HR and dealing with honestly just like unforgiving coworkers and like just people who are not willing to make any accommodations for you whatsoever felt very kind of lived in and reminded me of experiences of people I know who are dealing with a chronic illness or disability that makes it hard for them to just operate the way everybody else operates. And I'm wondering if you thought about it as a metaphor for disability and also like the whole chronic illness thing, if you feel like it reads differently now in 2022 than it might have when you originally wrote it.
I've been thinking a lot about both of those things. Yeah, it's I definitely did intend to sort of see his experience through the lens of disability. I was very leery and worried about presenting somebody's real experience in terms of like monstrosity. I have OCD, I have a mental illness, so I have in some senses a disability, but like, I feel like a chronic physical illness is not something I had experience of. So it's more like I just imagined what being a vampire would be like in real life, and I sort of filtered it through the lens that my friends who are disability scholars have taught me to use to just sort of think about, I believe it's called the social model of disability, where it is all about what is not done to help you rather than the difficulties that your body puts you through, which are a whole different thing and in many ways much easier to deal with. So yeah, it was in my mind, and I was trying to do it carefully. And because, like, it's all just fine to say that being trans is kind of like being a vampire, because, like, I'm a trans person, I get to say whatever I want.
But it's true, we're just
we're
like
all-
vampires.
Yeah, we are.
Exactly.
It's what was the second half of the question?
Oh,
It
just
was
like,
good.
how does it read now after COVID and everything?
Yeah,
And like,
I
how do you feel like you people are going to receive it, or how do you feel like it comes across now?
I'm kind of curious about that. Like, I literally don't know if it's going to land differently. And all I can say is that I hope that it lands, that people don't come away from this book feeling like, oh God, this asshole does not see me at all. Like, right, like if somebody, if somebody has long COVID, or if they have had an experience of COVID that was really, really medically terrifying, because, there's some really scary medical stuff in the book, waking up in the hospital after being in a medically induced coma, and, they make him a vampire because it's like an experimental cure for tetanus, which he contracted at work, which is like, being an archivist is pretty dangerous, actually. Be up on your shots. And yeah, and like, seriously, I'm glad we're all wearing masks now, because archivists should have been wearing masks the whole time. There is so much weird old plastic that's off-gassing stuff you don't even want to think about. I'm starting to motor about talking about archives. It does this. But yeah, the book is explicitly set in, I think, 2018, and that is because I wanted them to go see the movie Can You Ever Forgive Me in the theater. So I was very lucky in that sense. I did not have to think about how COVID would change the story. It's already set in the past. Sorry.
So it's in a world where no rep theaters where Can You Ever Forgive Me will not be in the theater at some point in the future.
Right, yeah, definitely. It's never
like,
revived.
that's a dystopian
Speculative.
future where
Yeah.
we had one chance to see that movie in the theater and never again.
Yeah.
So I've decided now that all my questions are going to relate to the CW. So like
Cool.
in the TV show Supernatural, when there's a ghost, they have to find the object that the ghost is tied to, and they have to kind of lay the ghost, they have to like burn it or throw salt in it and then burn it. And Dean has to say something like, oh, there's a ghost. I don't know. But I swear there's a question coming. So, I feel like one of the things I loved about your book is that you kind of talk about how processing an archive is like putting a ghost to rest, but it's a process of kind of coming up with the story of who this person was. And I'm wondering, like, how does that connect to like the idea of them as a ghost, and like the idea that ghosts are kind of beings that haven't had their story told properly?
Yeah, it's I was so excited when I figured that one out, because, and it wasn't also a huge leap, because as an archivist, a lot of my job is processing materials, and which is sort of reflected in the book in a semi-metaphorical way, and like a way that, because I didn't really, I couldn't cram all that library school into one volume. So again, sort of metaphorically, you'll see. I pastiche a bunch of stuff. When in doubt, pastiche a bunch of stuff. It's the writing trick that we all, need to live by. But yeah, archives are very haunted, and I don't really believe in ghosts, but I do believe that archives are very haunted, and that a lot of stuff, a lot of emotion just really clings to these collections, especially if the person who is responsible for making them has died. I have had so many experiences where I have a sense of unquietness about a collection, which is, it's a strange word to occur to me, actually, because I say unquietness, but Yeah, no, sorry, I guess I do like that. It's just, it's a cacophony of voices. It's too many voices. In that, it's not even that there's lots of different people whose experiences are represented in these diaries or flyers or what have you. It's also just that one person at different points of their life is speaking in different ways from different perspectives as they evolve. And your job as an archivist is not exactly to tell a story. When you put it all in folders and you put it in order, when you write a finding aid about it with like a little essay about the person's life, it's the historian's job to interpret and say what the story was about, and they will answer it in several different ways. That's one of the beautiful things about archives. But also the archivist cannot abdicate our responsibility to the past either. We cannot pretend that we are a neutral party who is telling an objective truth. So it is an act of, thank you, archives people. But it's an act of interpretation. And so, which I like to think of as an exorcism.
Yeah, and I feel like some of my favorite parts of the book are where you talk about kind of like engaging with these materials and kind of turning it into a collection instead of just like a random assortment of junk.
Yeah.
And like how much just garbage people get. Like I think it's super fascinating. So in the book, and we kind of got a taste of that in the section you read, the archive is kind of like the safe space for Saul. It's like it's his kind of safe haven or whatever. But it's not, like you said, it's kind of a dangerous place as well. And like I feel like in a lot of versions of this story, the archive would have just been like the cozy spot where Saul retreats to and nothing is bad, and then the rest of the world is scary. And I'm wondering why it was important for the archive to be both like a safe space, but also kind of not entirely safe.
Oh, that's a really good question. I really like the way that you phrased that.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about it, except in the sense that like that's just kind of what archives are like, and it's kind of what having a job is like. It's a safe space in that it really well, the people really well, but at the same time, like you're acting professionally, which is to say completely artificially. You're keeping up a facade, and I am extremely sincere, obviously, but sorry, I tried to make that a proof, but I actually am an embarrassingly sincere person. But like I'm always doing a bit in the room when I'm working with researchers, which is the main part of my job, just because our personal lives are kind of left at the door so that we can interact with people we're working with and interact with the past. Where was I going? Oh no. So yeah, I guess that's all I'm saying, that like work in archives are both safe and they are unsafe, and especially like I said, any job, but especially an archival job, because you are like I was talking about, even the physical hazards that it entails. There's a lot of heavy lifting, there's a lot of high shelves, there's a lot of strange substances, there's a lot of low rent buildings with in earthquake zones. I guess sort of that dichotomy and that play back and forth really interested me. Now that you put it that way, it did.
Yeah, and so actually one of the things that's really cool about the book is that there are other kind of trans vampires in the book, and that we kind of meet other, I feel like we meet there's other archivist vampires too, and like there's marginalized communities that are intersections of different marginal or different kind of specific groups. And one of the things that keeps coming up in the book is like the expectations that members of your group put on you, or the kind of rules that they try to impose on you, or the kind of, the baggage that they put on you. And, I'm just curious, like, if this was based on your own experience of like having intersecting marginalizations or different intersecting identities, or what it was that made you want to have like your main character Saul be part of other groups that shared these intersecting identities in different ways.
That is also not something that I was consciously thinking about at all, but yes, I mean, of course, that's how it's going to be, right? Like, so much of this book is, it is a love story about, two people who have really, really been through it, and I was talking to my friend Calvin about this the other day when he was interviewing me. Yes, my friends interview me because it's, I don't know, all the trans writers know each other. So, but we were talking about oh no, I've lost my train of thought. Sorry. Oh, the adrenaline is defeating.
You were
me
talking to
badly.
Calvin and.
Yeah, no. Calvin's awesome. Mind blank. No thoughts, head empty. We were probably talking about something relating to the intersections of being different kinds of person. Oh yeah, that's what it was. A lot of the love stories that I write are about building something up. You know, like if you have experienced, you know, a bunch of stuff in your life, but you sort of have like the wherewithal to try to create a life with another person. That's really a miracle. And I love to write about that process. But you know, this was a book about two people whose love is all about knocking things down, like destroying like the closet that they're experiencing, and like I mean, honestly, destroying soul standing at work is part of it. But yeah, there's a lot. It's like the tarot card, the tower, something that needs to collapse and that is not tenable, collapses as a result of their feelings for each other. And yeah, but it's important that love story is at the center of the book, because otherwise it's just full of soul being told in various ways that he's not doing a good job. He is always getting told that he is not a good archivist. He is told on one memorable occasion that he's not a good vampire. You know, like I'm saying this lightheartedly, but it's a really horrible experience for him. And probably the meanest thing that I put him through, like when somebody is like, you're doing monstrosity wrong, like where can you even turn? But yeah, it's but the thing is, the relationship is what allows him to keep on gripping to a sense of what he really is and his own internal understanding of what he's doing wrong and whether he's doing it wrong and what he needs to change and what he needs to improve. Because, you know, people are only sometimes right about that. Sometimes you need to listen to your internal voice about the ways that you're failing and need to unfail. So
yeah, I mean, so these supportive communities are kind of they're kind of like what you were saying about the archive before. They protect you, they keep you safe, but they also kind of put things on you, and they tax you in different ways. And that's I loved how you portrayed that, and I love like how put upon Saul is, like in a way that feels, and yet it's you know, it's a book that's actually partly because of the romance, but also just because of like the passion for understanding the past and for, you know, making sense of things. That's at the heart of it. It's not a sad book or a dark book. I think it's actually a very kind of not weirdly, but it's a cheerful book. It's actually a book that's like very kind of uplifting and very sweet, which I really appreciated. And talking about the romance, like one of the things I personally love, and you know, the thing that I often gravitate towards, especially as a reader, but also a little bit as a writer, is like romances where people kind of fall in love by like talking about ideas and sharing quips and sharing weird philosophies and sharing like little observations that are like, oh, that's such an interesting observation. And like, I feel like Saul and Elsie, wait, is that right?
Yeah.
Saul and Elsie, the kind of couple at the center of the book, really have that. And there's lots of moments where they kind of are chatting back and forth, and it's just like the best conversation, the best kind of dinner party conversation you ever wish you could have eavesdropped on. And you know, I guess I'm wondering, like, did you write just like pages and pages and pages of the two of them hanging out and then cherry pick the best bits? And like, why was it important for them to have this kind of relationship of just like geeking out together, kind of?
I did definitely write more than is in the book. My editor maybe cut out a bunch of it. She was totally right. Like it's, you know, maybe it would be so thematic if I put that on the AO3 someday. But like, yeah, no, it's a bunch of stuff was taken out just because characters can't talk literally for the whole book, one bowl of soup. Yeah, I have trouble imagining being excited about a relationship that is not like a meeting of the minds. And you know, these two turn out to have so much weird stuff in common. Like they're both from fandom in a really big way. They're both trans. I mean, I don't mind spoiling. I was also having like some mental back and forth about like, is the fact that Elsie like is coming out as a non-binary person a spoiler? And I'm like, is it a mark of marginalization that your identity is a spoiler? So I kind of don't want to treat it as one, but yeah, it's also a book about egg cracking. So, but yeah, they've got that stuff in common, and the intersection of those things in common too, because they realized that, back in the 90s when they were both really deep in fandom as teenagers, they didn't get along that well. And it has a lot to do with the fact that they were both trying to be lesbians, and in various ways were not quite lesbians, even though they definitely, right, they were vibing with some lesbian stuff, but not all of it. So yeah, and like back and forth and figuring out, where do you stand? Where do I stand? Where did we stand? Oh my God, we knew each other, and you were mean to me on a BBS once in 1994.
That's such a cool moment.
I was excited about that the day I wrote it too. Yeah. Yeah, that's love, baby.
Love is never having to say you're sorry for the things you did on the BBS in 1994.
So true.
Yeah, and like another thing I want to ask you about is sort of the intersection between fandom and the archive, and like how those are two different ways of kind of collecting knowledge or processing knowledge, and like what's so fertile about that intersection between like archivists and like the fan community.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence that AO3 is called the archive of our own. Like I think that the fact that like fandom reached for and we could have called it a library, like we could have called it I mean, basically I could have called it a bookstore, which, because fandom is very anti-capitalist and its basic ethos, probably wasn't going to happen, but it could have been anything, but it was an archive. Yeah, and it's because I think that fandom recognized the like the fact that a fanfic is it's kind of a unique manuscript and a unique document, even though it's published in some ways, if you put it on a site like the AO3, but it also has a distinctly archival quality in that you find it, often through kind of an esoteric searching process. Archives in the AO3 do both have slightly dubious search functions that we're always trying to make. I say we, I'm not involved with the AO3, but I imagine that we're trying to it's still, it's still in beta after all these years. So, but yeah, but yeah, and you find something unique that feels like it's just for you, that is like a conversation with a person who in many ways might not exist anymore. This story could be 5 or 6 years old, and unlike a lot of published books, fanfic often has like a very personal and therapeutic meaning. So yeah, the author could have changed a lot since they wrote this. And so I think there's a really obvious rhyme between the two of them. And it's not just that a lot of trans people seem to be involved with both of them. It's just that, that sense of the esoteric and the prosaic meeting in one thing is archives and its fandom.
Yeah, so by the way, we're going to open it up to audience questions in a minute. So I guess I have one final question, which is, so, Elsie is bringing their dead partners.
They're swapping pronouns a lot.
Yeah.
At the end of the book. I think it's all.
Yeah, their dead partners archives to Saul to process, and it's all to do with this fictional TV show that you kind of came up with, which feels a little bit X-Files and a little bit Xena, and it's sort of a 90s TV show that queer people were obsessed with. And like, where did that come from? And like, how did you come up with that? How much more of that show was there?
This was just me like taking from a book of mine that didn't work out, that like I like the premise. So I was just recycling like the quotes from, I really want to say, like there are quotes from the book in there that are quotes from my book, but I recontextualized them to make them a little bit worse. Right, because also Elsie's late partner has been sort of obsessively still writing fiction set in this universe, trying to understand, I think, like why she created it, what it means. And that's all in the archives now, this sort of like auto fan fiction, it's fanfic of one's own work. It exists. I have written it too. The manuscript I'm shopping right now is a little bit of fanfic of an unpublished work of mine. So anyway, yeah, nothing goes to waste. But yeah, I sort of it's just this very anxious, paranoid world, and it's about these shape-shifting clay aliens who are replacing people and killing them, and you have to act like it's normal, and you have to act like the clay alien who is now standing in for your loved one is your loved one, or things will get really bad for you. So it's in that. That's why I think the X-Files is the best comparison, because like that sense in the early 90s that was around, and I don't know where it was in the culture, where it was coming from. We were just all thinking about conspiracies, and we were thinking about, can we really trust anybody? Yeah, and like this late person, Tracy, who was really quite unhappy, and died without ever figuring out her stuff. And yeah, I think that sort of air of like, how do I be a person? I literally don't know. I feel like I'm just acting like a person, but nobody's really believing me. Just it deeply, and this is egg stuff. This is like part of what was going on with Tracy was certainly uncertainty about gender, and that what I was experiencing as well when I came up with this weirdness. So, yeah.
Cool. So, do we have any audience questions?
Yeah.
Hi.
I was curious about what archives need to visit them who aren't archivists, and I'm specifically thinking about the fact that Charlie was pointing out that you have these very unconventional vampires that don't really fit the usual kind of view of vampires, and I feel like there's a stereotype in our culture around like who benefits from archives and libraries. And I think we all know who that is. It's like, it's a young white boy who like finds himself in the stacks. You know what I mean? Like he learns who he is, and maybe he becomes a dragon, or he becomes friends with the dragon, or he finds a gem, or something like that, right? And so what my question is, to come back to the question, is just where do you see like queer and trans people in the archives? Like what do we get out of going to an archive, and like how does that shape us, and why is it important, and all that stuff? Just a small question.
Yeah, so we need to repeat the question for the folks at home.
Oh yes, I will do that. Yeah, it was surrounding like who benefits from archives. What do archives specifically mean to queer and trans people? Yeah, like what are they to people who don't work there? And I work with researchers. Like I said, that's the main part of my job. I am a host to the people who are coming to see my materials, and it's such a variety of stuff. It is, I mean, sometimes somebody is working on an art project, sometimes they're working on a book, they're working on an academic history, quite a lot, and sometimes they are making a comic. Sometimes they don't tell me what they're doing, and I don't ask, because it's something that is personal, or as yet unborn, or just sort of maybe not even figured out by themselves yet, which I encourage, because you don't need to go to archives for a reason. You can just, like, this is a conversation that I have a lot with people, specifically about Lou Sullivan's diaries, which I have the great good fortune to be one of the custodians of. People are always surprised that they could just come and look at them, but they can. That it's not completely democratic, because accessibility is, archives are not reliably accessible, even if you're trying to make them that way. But to a large extent, anybody can come in and just look. And but yeah, people come to work, they come to feel, they come to cry. They sometimes they come for one of these things and then realize that they're there for another one of them. The physical evidence of the past is incredibly emotionally powerful. And yeah, that's why I really recommend, actually, to everybody, do some archival research, even if you don't have a project. Maybe you'll figure out a project, maybe you won't, maybe it won't matter. But confronting history is, it's unmissable. It's highly recommended.
More questions? Hi.
Yes.
I'm kind of wondering your perspective, both
in regard to this book and outside of that as a writer, like how monstrosity and like romance sort of coexist, how that aligns in your mind, both like as you were writing this and what you wanted to portray and what you like to portray moving forward if you're still interested in those two subjects.
Sure. So how monstrosity and romance interacted in my brain when I was thinking about it, how those ideas might still be evolving. It's so weird because I never thought I was a monstrosity guy. I know some like very devout monstrosity people, and I always felt like it was not a topic that I was very interested in mulling over. And then like these vampires just came, and because of a joke my coworker made about vampire archivists who he told me about a difficult researcher, a difficult donor who had been upset that vampire archivists wanted all of his things. And so I then became a monstrosity guy instantly on the spot. I guess that's the thing. Like, I think that it's not to just get very, very Tumblr or like Tumblr from a few years, which I was never even really on Tumblr. I started talking to a bunch of people who are Tumblr enough that now I think I understand. The mortifying ordeal of being known is that's the line, about love. And I think that love makes us, I just started a relationship and I'm really excited about it. And I also feel very mortified by being known right now. So I can speak from very personal experience that like, it's just about like, oh God, I feel so gross. I feel so like weird. And I want to let somebody into my innermost heart. But it's slimy in there, like there's it's full of weird stuff that I picked up on the internet, like ages of 13 and 39 inclusive, like the inside of my brain and the inside of my heart, just like they feel like the lair of a monster. And, of course, the thing is everybody feels like that. And falling in love has a lot to do with, recognizing that, the two of you are, again, literally universal experience, feeling in some ways monstrous. So like, I think that it just kind of played into my existing feelings about writing love stories, which I love to do and have done a bunch and have continued to do a bunch in the manuscripts that are to come. It's just sort of about like the tremendous worry that you feel upon being vulnerable. And that's probably also why my monsters are really vulnerable ones. That's the thing, like writer Q&A experiences are all about realizing that something's embarrassingly on the nose that you didn't even intend to do.
Hi.
I see.
Is there anything in the archives that you worked in, collections that you worked in, that influence the book in any way or that show up in the book?
Oh, that is a really good question from an archivist. So like, that is you back there, Al. Sorry, right? Yes, okay. I can't see. Took my glasses off. Didn't want to get foggy. Yeah.
Can you repeat?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I forgot. I got lost in thought. So archives that I have worked with, archival materials that I have worked with, did they seep into the book's groundwater at all? And yeah, the answer is like, I just, there are a few, and a lot of them were at the Historical Society. And I think that the one that I'm thinking of the most is, it's a collection by a guy, he was like, he did a lot of leather community stuff, a lot of uniform stuff. He was sort of involved with the deaf community, although he was not himself deaf. He was quite interesting, and he had political beliefs that were quite abhorrent to me. And I just remember, I processed his collection at one point, and I really remember being so unsettled by it, and just sort of I don't want to get into too much, but yeah, no, I didn't like him. I simply did not like him very much. And I did not think that we would have very much in common if we met. And at the same time, I was very aware of like, there's a cacophony here that I do not wish to like erase or smooth out like the parts of this guy's life that I didn't like. I just wanted to accurately tell the story of what I saw in that collection. And I mean, that's so often how it is. Like when I was at the California Historical Society, I worked with a collection on the People's Temple in Jonestown. And that of course was an intensely terrifying collection to work with and emotionally wearing. And just sort of the same, like, I have no wish to smooth this out. This is an atrocity. And at the same time, I feel like I am doing good work by putting it in order so that people can look at it. And yeah, like I said, archival emotions are just very intense that way. And it's weird that it went into the book, because in the book, it's quite benign. The collection that he's working with, it is simply that somebody who seems that they were very unhappy when they were alive had a collection that was emotionally complicated. It's nothing like this, but it's sort of the same, like, like, I might not like you, but I see you. And that is, and I want other people to see you too. And they probably won't like you either. But they should see you. I'm sorry, that went on long because I started spiraling out about anxiety stuff. But yeah, no, not everything I've ever done has made its way into the book in sort of that way.
So we got time for a couple more questions, I think. Ready? Hi.
Hi. I thought it was interesting to an earlier question that you talked about how you didn't initially bring together monstrosity and romance, at least explicitly. But like one of my personal experiences is just like talking to other people, like my first exposure to like a lesbian romance was this like vampiric, based on like a gothic, like, gothic 17th century novel that someone made a YouTube mini series out of, very classic. And so in any way, do you see your work as kind of part of this seemingly like tradition between queer relationships and specifically? And like, I was thinking about like, why is it not werewolves or some other sort of, character?
Yeah, so like, sorry, I tried to like, I'm so like the phrase "why not werewolves" is like reverberating into my brain. And, but like, yeah, how does
you
my
repeat the
book?
question?
Yeah, no, I'm trying not to think about werewolves. So how, right, like, how did a tradition of queer vampires and like specifically queer monstrosity and romance play into my thinking about this book? I definitely know there's a long history of queer vampires that has been played with by other queer writers. And I just, again, that was something that I never thought would have much to, I wasn't expecting to work in that tradition. I never felt that connected to it. But just for some reason, when, again, it seems so obvious, like, of course it's going to be a book about queer people. And of course it's going to be about, the ways that people think queer people are sexy and dangerous, but also are terrified of us. I think that's really, that's now I get it. Now I know why there are queer vampires, why everybody else has explored this idea, why we're all really obsessed with this idea, even if we don't think we are. It's just sort of about that anxiety that folks sometimes feel about queerness. I mean, even from inside. And that's sort of probably another reason I was interested in talking about the ordinary, everyday, prosaic aspects of being a vampire, because being queer really is a thing that has many prosaic aspects as well. It's got a lot of paperwork, especially for trans, got huge amount of paperwork. But yeah, no, why not? Sorry, now I'm thinking about the werewolf thing. I want to leave time for another question or two if folks have them, but like, transmasculine people are sort of like, transmascs are werewolves is a thing that I've definitely heard said, and I don't think that it's untrue. But for whatever reason, I did not attach to that one. I attached to the vampire. So I don't know. There are still frontiers of monstrosity to realize that I am interested in without even knowing it.
Okay, so maybe one last question. Yeah.
We can chat after the thing too.
I mean, I'll ask a silly one.
Yes,
Give me a
a
silly
silly
one.
question, please.
I really appreciate you saying it's okay to write fan fiction about your own work. Thank you for saying that in public.
Hell yeah.
Before you started writing books that ended up published out in the world, did you write fan fiction? And if so, how did that end up informing your craft as a writer or your practice as a writer?
Oh yeah, no, I still write fan
Please
fiction.
repeat the
Yeah,
question.
sorry. Thank you, Charlie J. The thing that I said, what did I say hell yeah to? It had something to do with fan fiction. The question is, did I write fanfic before I was a published author, and how has it informed my practice as a writer of original work? That's not a silly question at all. That is a question that is very central to a lot of contemporary writers' lives. A lot of us start in fanfic. A lot of us continue in fanfic. Like I said, I have material in the AO3 from last year, and it is and like I haven't been away for many years. I kind of came back to it during the pandemic because my brain was melting, and I felt like sort of anew that power that fanfic has to keep us writing and keep us obsessed and keep us like following the stuff that we are really hung up on, and sort of like finding our way back into what motivates us to be writers. No, I think that fanfic is it's definitely gotten into my aesthetic. The fact that most of my work is kind of heightened love stories, is fanfic-y. They're heightened queer stories, and the fact that I'm obsessed with people reacting to documents is not just an archives thing, but also just the fact that you never, you write fanfic because you are really driven to do it. And you've got to look at the kind of fanfic that you are driven to write, if that is your thing, because it probably tells you what you want to write in every sense, in every context in which you're writing. Like you've got to follow the stuff that you can't let go. I mean, otherwise, if you don't follow the stuff that you can't let go, it'll be like a dog that is trying to drag you around the park while you're trying to read your phone. It'll be, you stumble, it'll be undignified. So just commit to the stuff that you want to do.
Yay, thank you. Please support Green Apple. Please buy lots and lots and lots of books.
Buy
Look at
many
all these
books.
beautiful
Don't have to
books.
just
Buy
buy my
them
book.
all. Buy
Buy
all
Charlie
of
James'
them.
books.
Buy them all.
I can't say anything better than that. So, but I do want to just give one more hand to Isaac and Brady.
Thank you so much.
So are you willing to sign people's books?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm chillaxing. I'm signing.
He's gonna do it. I'm gonna have Isaac standing at the back desk here, and you folks can wrap around. If you need to know where to go, I will gladly show you. Books are available for purchase at the front. You can come on back. And thank you so kindly and with my whole heart for joining us.